Should the Warriors trade for Brandon Ingram? Let's get into it. What's good, y'all? So in this video, we're gonna go over a hypothetical Brandon Ingram trade. Then later, I'm gonna break down Steph Curry's most recent comments on his Warriors future and what it means for Golden State. But first, let's get to Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram is a 6'8" small forward for the New Orleans Pelicans. He has a 7'3" wingspan, weighing in at 190 pounds. For his career, he averages 19.4 points per game, but 21 points per game last season, shooting 49% from the field, 35.5% from three on 3.8 attempts a game with a 58% true shooting. Brandon Ingram's a talented wing with playmaking and scoring chops. He's very skilled with great positional size. His natural position is small forward, but he's capable of playing multiple positions, including shooting guard and power forward. He's even capable of running point guard occasionally for stretches of the game. Alright, so in my opinion, Brandon Ingram's best attribute is his playmaking. He's a point forward with very solid court vision and a willingness to distribute the ball. Due to his 6'8" height and great court vision, he's able to see over defenders and deliver pinpoint passes. Last season, he averaged 5.7 assists a game to only 2.3 turnovers. That's almost a 2.4 to 1 turnover ratio, which would be considered solid for a natural point guard. But for a 6'8" wing, that's pretty impressive. So adding Ingram to the lineup is essentially like having a second point guard on the court, except he's 6'8". Next up, let's get to his bread and butter. Brandon Ingram has one of the smoothest mid-range games in the league. Outside of dudes like KD, DeMar DeRozan, Devin Booker, Brandon Ingram's up there in terms of most dangerous mid-range shooters. He shoots 45% from 3 to 10 feet, 51% from 10 to 16 feet, and 46% from 16 feet out to the three-point line. Considering the level of shot difficulty on these attempts, these are pretty efficient numbers. He's way more comfortable operating the mid-range than he is from 3. He shot 35.5% from 3 on 3.8 attempts a game. That's nowhere near enough volume on 3-point attempts for someone with his archetype. Under 4 3-point attempts for a wing in today's NBA is really low. He should be attempting at least double that, but for whatever reason, his confidence behind the 3-point line comes and goes. And that's one of the main factors that made him a tough fit next to Zion Williamson. Moving on to defense. I would consider him an average to slightly above average defender. And considering his physical tools as a 6'8" wing with a 7'3" wingspan, just being an average defender is pretty underwhelming. If you compare his defense to Andrew Wiggins when he's at his best, he's at least a tier or 2 lower as a defender. Alright, so that's the overview. Now, you know what time it is. It's time to fire up the trade machine. Let's see what we got. Alright, so the asking price here is doable. Whether this is an overpay or not, all depends on the version of Wiggins you're giving up. If it's the 2022 championship version of Wiggins during that playoff run, I wouldn't trade that player for Ingram straight up, to be honest with you. That version of Wiggins that's that locked in, playing that caliber of defense, is a more valuable player to a championship team than Brandon Ingram, in my opinion. But again, we haven't seen that version of Wiggins since 2022. We're now going into the 2024-2025 season. Now, while I'm hopeful we'll see that version of Wiggins this season, it's just not guaranteed. Now, assuming it's last year's version of Andrew Wiggins, plus Moody, plus a first-round pick, plus 2 seconds. That seems like a pretty fair exchange for someone as talented as Brandon Ingram. Alright, now let's check out the depth chart. We got the chef at point. We got DeAnthony Melton at the 2. We got Brandon Ingram at the 3, Jonathan Kuminga at the 4, and Draymond Green at the 5. Like I explained in my last video, all indications is that Pods is the most likely starter. But in this scenario, trading for Brandon Ingram, it makes more sense to have Melton in that spot over Pods. Because like I explained earlier, Brandon Ingram is essentially a second point guard on the court. So there's no need for Pods ball handling if you got Brandon Ingram in the starting lineup. You stagger Ingram and Pods so you can have Pods in the second unit where they need his ball handling more. Also, you're trading Andrew Wiggins, your best point of attack defender. Brandon Ingram should not be your go-to wing stopper in the starting lineup, which is why Melton's starting. He's a better fit with the starters due to his 3-and-D ability. Melton takes the toughest defensive assignment, and then between Ingram and Kuminga, you can figure out who takes the second and third. With the second unit, you got Pods running the show, with Buddy Hield wreaking havoc off ball. You got GP2 and Kyle Anderson in the passing lanes wreaking havoc, forcing turnovers. And you got TJD protecting the paint. You can also mix in Quentin Post as a stretch 5, who provides size as a 7-footer and floor spacing at the same time, something the Warriors have never had at the center position. One more note on the starters. Steph is now free to play off ball if he wants, with Ingram handling the ball. I think it's been established by now that Curry actually prefers to play off ball. No one really knows why. Maybe it's less wear and tear than playing on ball. But the problem with Steph off ball playing off of Draymond is Draymond's a non-scoring threat, besides him rolling to the rim with an advantage, which makes it easier for the defense to zero in on Steph. Alright, let's get into some pros and cons, starting with some pros. Ingram's only 26 years old, so he theoretically hasn't hit his physical prime yet. It's very possible that with a change of scenery, next to a superstar of Steph Curry's caliber, we see a version of Ingram that we've never seen before. No disrespect to Zion, because he's a great player, but he ain't no Steph Curry, bro. If you put a wing that's a 20-point per game scorer that just so happens to also be a great playmaker next to Steph, bro, the Warriors haven't had a wing like that since KD. Now, Ingram's no KD. He's a poor man's version of KD, but a similar archetype on a lower scale. And even with a weaker version, that formula next to Steph is still potent. Putting playmakers next to Steph has always been the key to success. Think about Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, Draymond Green. But when you put a playmaker that's also a scorer next to Steph, that's a very dangerous team. Alright, now let's get to the cons. Brandon Ingram can be extremely passive at times. And I mean like passive to a fault. Like he looks like he's out there spooked, like he's scared. I hate to say it, but from what I've seen, it looks like he don't got that dog in him. Just because you're a talented player doesn't mean you automatically got that dog in you. And that's also not something you can teach. If you gotta constantly hype a player up and put a battery in his back, it's not sustainable. Now the Warriors have seen results with that. mainly Draymond Green hyping up Wiggins and helping elevate him to a level we've never seen before. But like I said, it's not really sustainable. Brandon Ingram, personality-wise, is actually really similar to Wiggins. The next con: he doesn't have that killer mentality. In these past playoffs, when Zion got injured, all of a sudden the Pelicans were looking towards Ingram to save him. He was the most talented player on the team at that point. They needed him to elevate his game. New Orleans ended up getting swept by OKC, and Ingram didn't score 20 points in a single game. It was bad, bro. Like, OKC's a great defense. They were one of the top 2 defenses in the league this year, but you couldn't get 20 points one game, bro. Not one game. When you're down and your team is depending on you the most, that's disappointing. So yeah, man, I don't think he got that killer mentality, to be honest with you. When the going gets tough, he gets passive. Now, luckily on this team, we got Steph Curry, because Steph gonna close games for us. But it would be nice to be able to count on him in case Steph's having an off game. The next con: whichever team trades for him has to be prepared to offer him a max contract. And his max contract is a lot of money. Ingram's one of those players that has the talent of a max player, but you just don't see the results on the court. That's the main reason the Ingram trade hasn't happened yet, because teams that will potentially trade for him ain't really trying to give him a max contract. Again, not because he doesn't have the talent of a max player. It's just the production on the court doesn't match up, which leads to the next point. He's injury prone, which makes a trade for him extremely risky. Because let's say you make that trade and you give him that max contract. All right, you're paying this dude like 50 M's a year. You better be on the court producing. The Warriors can afford for him to be injured. You got 36-year-old Steph, who you can pretty much pencil in and get injured at some point. Through no fault of his own, by the way. That's just how it is when you get older. You're more easily susceptible to getting injured. But Brandon Ingram ain't got no excuse. He's 26 years old, and yet he always finds himself in street clothes. The next con: he struggles getting to the rim consistently, which is why he relies on his mid-range game so much. Ingram's a weird player because he is athletic and he does have bounce so he can load up, but that athleticism doesn't equate to his first step. Ingram can't really blow past nobody. Rarely would he beat his man off the dribble, and he knows that, which is why he's developed this crazy mid-range game. That's how he compensates for his lack of explosion getting to the rim. And I mean, hey, when you're 6'8" and you can rise up and pretty much get a clean look anytime you want, it's understandable. But when you get to the playoffs and you're playing against better and better defenses, with better and better defenders, and they're locked in on that scouting report, and they're taking away things, and they're taking away your counters, all of a sudden rising up for that mid-range gets a little bit tougher. All of a sudden there's a well-contested hand in your face a lot more often. Defenders are pushing you out farther and farther from your sweet spot. Players are getting more physical with you. In the playoffs, the refs let a lot of physicality go, and Ingram's a pretty slight dude. I mean, the dude's 6'8" and he's listed at 190. So yeah, in the playoff setting, I will be worried about Ingram as your second option. The next con: he has an inconsistency in terms of his willingness to shoot 3-pointers. Yo, this dude Ingram, bro, is some games where when the ball gets to him, he's scared to shoot. Like, he just refuses to shoot. He'll pump fake and then try to drive and go to his mid-range shot and take a bad shot. He'll catch the ball wide open for a 3-pointer. He'll pump fake, the defender will recover. He'll try to work his way to a mid-range pull-up, and it's just a way tougher shot. And it's like, bruh, just shoot the 3. But sometimes, I don't know if it's just like a confidence thing or he's just not comfortable. I don't know what it is. But there will be stretches during the season where he just refuses to take 3-pointers. And then there's other times where as soon as the ball touches his hand, it's up and it's gone, and he's knocking it down. So I don't know, bro. It's just a weird mindset with his aggressiveness. And playing next to Steph, if he kicks the ball to you after being doubled and triple teamed, bro, you better be locked and loaded. You better be ready to shoot. I ain't trying to see no weak pump fake into a midi pull up. I ain't trying to see none of that, bro. I ain't trying to see none of that. On this team specifically, teams are going to sell out to stop Steph, especially in the playoffs. As a second option on this team, you've got to be ready to capitalize off the advantage Steph creates for you. You're going to get the easiest looks of your life. You can't be scared to shoot. You can't be pump faking into tougher shots. None of that, bro. But anyways, man, this is a very intriguing trade. I like the idea of pairing Wiggins and Kuminga as your wing tandem. They both bring contrasting strengths to the team. Kuminga has that score-first mentality and that aggressive mindset that's needed in the second option. And on the other side of the coin, you got Brandon Ingram, who's a very willing passer, who has no problems deferring to his teammates. He's a player who seemingly gets just as much satisfaction setting up a teammate than he is scoring himself, while at the same time being capable of giving you 20. I like how they complement each other as a wing tandem, not just in mentality, but in play style. Kuminga provides rim pressure and plays with an aggression and physicality getting downhill that's much needed on a team like this that lacks athleticism overall. Besides Steph, he's basically the only guy on the roster that can get to the rim. Kuminga is also the Warriors' best player in terms of compromising the defense and getting to the free throw line. And then you got Ingram, who picks you apart with a finesse play style, working his defender down to a spot, getting to his midi. When you combine Kuminga's rim pressure with Ingram's mid-range attack and Steph barbecuing teams from the three-point line, all of a sudden you got a weapon offensively for every level of scoring. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of down on this trade at first, but through the process of making this video and weighing the pros and cons, I think I talked myself into it. Brandon Ingram's stock is as low as it might ever be right now, which might mean he's as affordable as he ever will be. Acquiring a wing talent of Brandon Ingram's caliber without giving up Pajimski and without giving up Kuminga, bro, that's a win. That might be a really good opportunity to upgrade the talent level without giving up your future. He's young enough and talented enough to take a chance on. If you put him on this Warriors team, in this environment, surrounded by champions and winners, the Warriors culture might be able to unlock something in him. So with that being said, I think I'm in on this trade. So I will have Brandon Ingram as my contingency plan in case they don't get Lowry. Y'all let me know in the comments how y'all feel about trading for Brandon Ingram and how do you feel about this trade package. All right, moving on to Steph Curry, who has some very interesting quotes today about his future with the Warriors. Let's read these quotes real quick. It's tough, right? I've always said I wanted to be a Warrior for life. At this stage of my career, I feel like that's possible. And you can still be competitive, and it doesn't mean you guarantee the championship. It doesn't mean winning. Winning is always a priority, but obviously you're realistic. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen if you stay the course. You need to shake things up and keep reimagining what it looks like to evolve with what a league is at right now. I'm taking it one step at a time, to be honest. I think that's the only way that will protect my happiness. Also, it allows me to enjoy being myself when I'm out there playing. And I'll continue to make decisions that are best for me and my career. And at the end of the day, when it comes to just the imagination, I want to win. Let's put it this way. It's a long-winded way of saying that if there is a situation where you're a bottom feeder, and it's just because you want to stay there, but I don't think that's going to be reality. All right, so that's a quote from Steph. He said a lot there, but basically in translation, what Steph is saying is, ideally, he wants to be a Warrior for life. That's what he hopes for. That's what he's striving for. He wants to be one of those rare athletes that spent their entire career with one team. A Kobe Bryant, a Tim Duncan, a Dirk Nowitzki. He wants to be one of those franchise guys. But he's also saying, don't take that for granted. Don't just assume he's going to be a good sport and stay with the Warriors if they're not serious about winning. He wants to win. He wants to be on a competitive team that's in position to win. If the Warriors are in a situation where they're a bottom feeder, aka a tanking team, aka a non-playoff team, Steph wants no part of that. And he will do what's best for him in his career, which means if the Warriors don't put a good enough roster around him and they're not even trying to improve, he will demand a trade. I think this is the first time Steph has had this tone in terms of his future with the Warriors. He's basically saying, like, look, I want to compete, put a competitive team around me or I'm gone. And I get it, man. He's 36 years old. In his mind, he's like, look, bro, I got a chance here. Rightfully so. He's like, bro, I'm not trying to waste the last few years of the back end of my prime on unserious teams. He wants to play meaningful basketball. After everything he's done for the franchise, he's earned the right. So if I'm reading this and I'm the Warriors front office, I'm getting to do some help. You got to go get Larry Markkinen, bro. You got to give Steph a chance. You got to put a competitive team around him. This team as currently constructed, while it is better than last season, it's not a championship caliber team. Let's say you stay pat with this team as is, you don't make any big trades, and you go in the playoffs and you get bounced in the first or second round. Bruh, that's not good enough for Steph. At that point, going into next year, he's turning 37, bro. How much longer do you think he's going to wait for these kids to take a leap? The jig is up, bro. The Warriors can't have it both ways. You can't keep all your young players while simultaneously chasing the championship with Steph Curry. The Warriors better make a move, bro. The clock's ticking and it looks like Steph is getting impatient.